people milling around in the hall. So if you could find a seat. When last we checked in with our heroes, they had just defeated Article 7.
She said see ya. I know, I'm sorry. No, her husband.
That's a dead letter. We'll move on to, we'll reconvene the meeting and move on to Article 8. Mr. Allen, are you doing Article 8? Yeah, just move on.
I guess they like
Move Article 8 as one.
I move Article 8 is warned.
Article 8, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum of $130,000 for the Town Highway Equipment Reserve Fund. Is there a second to Article 8? We got one? Article 8 is moved and seconded. Mr. Allen.
I think after what we did this morning, we need something a little more enlightening to discuss, talk about. I've never been here to talk about trucks, but I kind of want to give you a little more history of where we are as a town. This is basically for equipment, but also our trucks. And we've been brought up about 10-wheelers and 6-wheelers. But going back to 98, the government started to set goals that we have zero emissions. And by 2010, we started to have diesel trucks that put out zero emissions. They're very expensive, and we were one of the few towns that actually moved up and started to purchase them. We were also one of the first towns in southern Vermont that by 2016, 100% of our fleet was zero emissions. It cost us more money for them, but in the long run, it was the best decision that we could have made because there was a lot of other manufacturers that just paid a penalty, and now it caught up to them. The government was closing them down, and now they basically are in serious trouble. All the towns that have those trucks don't know what to do with them. So we're actually should be proud of ourselves that our trucks are running around, not putting down any pollution. We're moving into new categories now where they want better fuel economy, but everything is to clean the environment up. And I'm saying we're one of the leaders in the pack for doing it. Also what's happened, because we're there, our resale value of our trucks are tremendously high. Trucks that we just traded in last year to get 52, the towns that had the same trucks that didn't have it were getting anywhere from 0 to 10,000 in trade. So what we're always looking at is what does it cost us to own these vehicles for the life of them? We now are purchasing trucks that we keep for 7 years because they have a full 7-year warranty, so we don't have very much unanticipated expenses. When we get all done, we've been tracking our cost of ownership without the minor repairs. It costs us about $19,000 a year from the time we buy it to the time we trade it in. The state average is 27, and there's a lot of towns that are $36,000 a year trying to get this situation fixed back again. So as a town, I feel pretty good that we're in good shape, and we're going to be headed in that because everything from now on that we trade in is going to be worth more. And what's going to end up being is we're going to end up actually level funding that for a while because I don't see any much more of an anticipated cost, for the next few years. So, anyways, so last year we had a carryover in that fund of about 50,000. We voted 130. We end up having 180. We purchased a 2019 truck, and we also purchased a half a roller, as you heard. The rollers turned out to be a great asset because what we're doing is we grade the road, the dirt, we're packing them to keep them so that the water doesn't turn around and rut it up. We're still having, like every town, tremendous problems with dirt roads and ruts. It's getting wetter, it's getting harder to take care of. But we're, and obviously later on when we try to address how we're going to take care of the road, but the equipment we have in this town is A1, but also, as I've said, I feel like it's costing us less than most towns that are out there.
Are there questions or discussion on Article 8? Mr. Clark.
Just out of curiosity, Craig, what's in our fleet? It's got a diesel engine in it, and what's the aging on that equipment?
We're actually, we may trade in a 2014, so like I said, we're heading to the model year 2021, so we're trading them every 6 to 7 years. Okay.
Let me restate that question. How many trucks have we got? What are their ages? And what other equipment does the town own? And just to narrow it, so we're talking about heavier equipment, not chainsaws, equipment with a diesel engine. It might be bulldozer, a road grader, a loader. What do we got?
Chuck's in the background, he's probably better at answering that, but I would say we have 6, Chuck, you could correct me, but we have 6 trucks, a road grader, backhoe, an excavator, 2 loaders, what else we have?
I appreciate that, and pardon me for burning time like this. But my curiosity, I guess, is since we have this equipment, somebody must know what the aging is on it, what the likely replacement cycle is. And I'm actually trying to give you a platform here where you can show us that you really do take care of this town. And you just mentioned your capital reserve fund. I'm interested in what you, as a select board, are predicting for your town highway capital needs, not just over like this year or next year, but over, say, the next 5 or 10 years. This may not be a question that you are prepared for, and it's not at all intended as an ambush, but I have a sense that what we're hearing is that in terms of the adequacy of the fleet and the cost of carrying it, that you're telling us that we're in pretty good shape. And I'm just simply curious as to what we got and what you're anticipating for long-term capital needs.
Got that on the top of your head?
No. Yeah, I could follow up and give you the answers to that, but I think okay, yeah. Basically, we're in good shape, to be honest with you, on it. Our more capital ones, the only ones that we kind of gear up and we know we're coming is the road grader, which we just purchased, so that puts us, those are every 10, 15 years. Everything else is on a shorter term.
Ms. Mitchell.
Speaking of the road grader, when we got the road grader, I asked if the town crew would be trained how to use the road grader. From what I've seen, I'm not convinced they were trained how to use that neat computerized road grader. Were they? And if they weren't, it's time, maybe some of this extra money in the highway department could be used for training instead of letting them learn by making mistakes.
My first answer would be yes, but I need Chuck to verify that. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Both grader operators are on the state program. Grader operators. They've also went to the program called Basic Road, which is both graded. And people have commented they're half as good now as the old operator, which did it for 30 years. So I thought that was pretty good. They've only done it for 2 years.
Further discussion of Article 8. Mr. Major. I'm told I already needed a runner on an engine.
Hi, David Major. This is maybe not the best place for this, but the use of the roads on Sundays has increased rather dramatically with Amazon Prime. And I, in fact, have had to pull out Amazon Prime trucks from our road on Sundays. So I want to suggest to the select board that you perhaps recognize that need and spend a little time at some point figuring out a way to do more road maintenance on Sundays than, and I'm not happy about it, but it seems to be the case that we're using the roads much more, and especially Amazon Prime trucks are using the roads much more on Sundays than used to be the case.
Well, aren't they going to drones soon?
Drones, that's the idea.
Any response? Further discussion of Article 8? Up in the corner here? We're gonna make you up.
Hello, my name's Warren Clark. We just had a very lengthy discussion before lunch about what we need to do with about approximately $500,000 surplus. In light of that, I'm going to advocate that we do not need to raise an additional $130,000 to put in a reserve fund.
Further discussion of Article 8? Ready for the question? All those in favor of Article 8, $130,000 to the Highway Equipment Reserve Fund, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Article 8 is approved. Article 9, Ms. Harlow.
I move Article 9 as warned.
Article 9, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum of $15,000 for the Bridge Rehabilitation Reserve Fund. Is there a second for Article 9? Second. Article 9 is moved and seconded. Ms. Harlow.
The bridge fund currently has $106,483 in it. From FY19, we had $123,033 left. If you add this $15,000, it brings the total to $137,33. So this is how we spend it. In this year's budget, we paid $31,550 to paint the beams on Goldie's Bridge and the bridge on West West Road over the East Putney Brook. Then the remaining is $106,000 and change. From that, we pay for the town's portion of the deck replacement on the bridge on Route 121 over the Saxons River. So that's going to take place in the summer of 2022. And the state has deemed this bridge in poor condition, and we voted to not totally replace it, but to repair the deck. So the cost of the repair will be $802,000. We have to pay 5%. That's about $53,000. We've already started paying for the bridge engineering and design. So after that, we'll have $53,383 remaining in the bridge fund. But coming up is the next bridge will be the one at the intersection of Patch Road and Westminster West Road. That's going to have to be replaced, and the state's pushing that up in the rankings of bridges that have to be replaced.
Now, I've lived in Westminster West since 1978, and I think that darn bridge has been condemned twice by the state, and then they just don't do anything about it. But anyway, Mr. Major.
This is kind of a follow-up from the last speaker in the previous motion, and from what Kevin Hughes was talking about when we were talking about the general operating funds, which we just voted down. I believe in that, maybe I'll just offer an amendment to this and just see how it flies. would offer the amendment that we strike "will raise" and just say the voters of the town of Westminster appropriate the sum of $15,000 for the bridge rehabilitation reserve fund. Because I'm concerned that we may be telling ourselves that to increase our taxes to fund these reserve funds, then we have this surplus we have to spend. We don't want to have our operating budget be reduced by a large amount one year and have that the next year be hit with a large tax increase when we could be spreading the funds out a little bit. So anyway, I'll offer that as an amendment. Thank you.
Is there a second to Mr. Major's amendment? Is that a second? Are you seconding that there? Did we get a second? Okay. Amendment moved and seconded to strike "will raise and." So the motion, the article would read, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will appropriate the sum of $15,000.
David Fletcher, we just discussed this. You said that the article has to say raise or we won't have the money. So what does that do?
It means it's got to go out of the money they already got.
Which we didn't pass anything.
Oh, they got $550,000 in the bank. I mean, that's the point, is to come out of that. Discussion of Mr. Major's proposed amendment. Mr. Beebe.
My only concern on changing any of these articles, on any of these articles on the floor. Sorry, my voice carries pretty well. The only concern I have on changing any of the articles on the floor, even though we don't have a budget at this point in time, is all these articles go through the town's attorney as far as wording and the way they work for the town of Westminster. So I'm a little bit leery about changing the wording on any of these articles at this point in time without having legal counsel think about it, but that's just my thought.
Mr. Beebe strikes a note of caution. Further discussion on Mr. Major's amendment to strike the "will raise" part. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Nay. I can't tell whether the nays were just a little louder or... All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Ask for it. You see anybody who shouldn't be voting is voting? Basically, in the honor system. Will my quarter civil authority?
You don't even know what you're voting for. You're voting for the
Those renovations. Or less.
All those opposed, please raise your hands. Thank you. The results of your vote are 31 in favor of the amendment, 50 opposed. The amendment fails. Back to the main article, $15,000 for the bridge fund. Further discussion of Article 9? Yes.
June Streeter, Westminster. I would just like some clarification on the fund balance policy. Would that amendment even been able to come to light with the new fund balance policy that we have?
I don't think the reserve fund policy has anything to do with this reserve fund. It's a different reserve fund.
Well, if we weren't going to raise the money, maybe I'm wrong, he was proposing to use the fund surplus. Were you not?
Right, I'm assuming.
So would you even been able to do that with the policy that we have in place?
I'm assuming, I mean, yeah, the whole surplus would not have to go into the emergency, what do we call it? The new policy fund.
That's never been funded. They've never put money in that fund. It's all sitting in general.
So what June is referencing is she's wondering if the money was in our reserve policy fund, which was established last year. And what's happened is the money is sitting in our general fund. It's never been moved to that reserve fund. If it was moved to the reserve fund, they'd have to come back to us to spend it. So really, they would have the money in the general fund to fund this without raising it from taxation. They can appropriate it from the general fund, but that's what was just voted down. What I want everyone here to just very quickly, we had $550,000 in our general fund. That was as of the end of 2019. Our administration has been spending that money all year long. I don't know how much is in there. The reason we're having a special town meeting is to deal with spending that came out of that fund for the town hall that we never approved. So, we don't have $550,000 right now, is what I think everybody needs to understand. So to talk about taking $130 to pay for some highway equipment, and then take another 15 for this motion, and any other future motion, articles, does not make sense because we don't know how much money we have in there today because our administration has been spending it all year long.
Katie, at this point in time, we haven't touched the $550,000 surplus. Period. End of discussion. $21,000 has been overspent on the town hall at this point in time because we didn't have the money to take out of the surplus, or we're not taking the money out of the surplus to spend on the town hall to finish the town hall. None of the $550,000 has been touched yet. We voted to move $100,000 of it at the last select board meeting and give it back to the taxpayers. But however, that's not going to happen now until we have this next special town meeting. But none of that money has been touched yet. It hasn't been spent. The only money that's been spent on the town hall is what was appropriated and what was in the capital reserve fund for that building. Does that answer the question? $21,000 of it has been overspent. We didn't have that much money.
Is there an existing contract that we have money due on?
We have
for
a,
the renovations for the town hall? I
The
guess
phase
that's
one-
where I think I'm confused.
Phase 1 and Phase 2 have been paid for. The
Okay.
first phase was getting a second means of egress into the building. That was Phase 1. Phase 2 was putting on the front doors,
excuse my voice,
was putting on the front doors and putting the man lift in and getting actually heat into the upstairs meeting room with the Historical Society, etc. The balance of the contract was to change the existing rooms inside, to get the closets in, to get the IT space and so forth done. That contract, we validated,
Yeah.
I guess would be a better word for it, at the last meeting. The contract we've had since July 1st or thereabouts. At this point in time, we have only spent $21,000 of that we didn't have in the account.
Okay, I guess I was misunderstanding that there was a contract with a builder to finish work.
There is.
It was either 190 or 90,000, I'm
There
not
is.
sure. And my assumption was that be coming out of our general fund, so I just wanted to share my thoughts about what the general fund balance would be if those were paid. So I apologize if I misspoke.
Yes, point of order.
There's a great deal of discussion taking place that is not germane to this article, but an amendment was defeated. Will the moderator please rule on this, whether the discussion continues is not germane to Article 9?
I think the discussion that people are trying to have is where the money for this article comes from, and I think that is germane to the article. But
The amendment was defeated.
The amendment was defeated. The article is still in front of us, and how it's funded is still an aspect of the article.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on Article 9. I saw Ms. Stoddard. Well, are you, okay, Ms. Stoddard, please.
I would like to know if we've overspent it by 21,000, Sheldon, where you think that $21,000 came from, if it's not from the surplus that we started with 550,000. If we've overspent, where is the 21 coming from?
Got no idea, Cindy, I can't tell you.
It's coming from the general fund surplus.
Probably it was.
Thank you.
Further discussion of Article 9. Yes, sir.
Rick's going over to Deer Run. Pardon me, I don't hear well. There was a lot of numbers thrown out on what was in the bridge construction fund, what was spent, et cetera, et cetera. $15,000 doesn't seem to me an awful lot to add to it. The last number I heard before that, I think, was the $50,000 range, which, like I say, I don't hear well. Could you alleviate some of my concerns that there's going to be enough money in that bridge reconstruction fund?
There will be enough money, correct me if I'm wrong, in there to pay for our portion of.
Use the mic, please.
There will be enough money to pay for our portion of the Route 121 bridge. We have to pay 5%, which is.
And I'm presuming from that everything else is covered up to
So,
before
yes.
that point?
Yes.
And you're planning ahead no further than that particular bridge?
Right, so in a couple of years, we're going to have to replace the bridge over the East Putney Brook Road.
Okay.
And the state comes up with rankings and, comes and gives us options. And we have to come up with part of them, and the state comes up with a great deal of money, but the town also has to pay.
I understand that 15,000 is not an awful lot when you start throwing into bridges, so I was a little bit concerned.
They're expensive.
You're exactly right. Thank you.
Further discussion of Article 9. Are you ready for the question? Seeing no hands. All those in favor of passing Article 9 to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum of $15,000 for the Bridge Rehabilitation Reserve Fund. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Article 9 is approved. Article 10, Mr. Beaver.
I move the article as warned.
Article 10, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster vote pursuant to VSA 32, section 3832, paragraph 7, to exempt from taxation for a period of 5 years the real estate of the Westminster Aqueduct Society. Is there a second Article 10? Yes, we have seconds. Discussion of Article 10. Mr. Beebe?
Are there any questions to Article? This is,
How much money are we talking about?
this, the Westminster Aqueduct and several other entities within the town of Westminster have always been granted in basically no taxes for periods of 5 years. The Westminster swimming pool is another one of them. There's a Westminster Aqueduct in North Westminster. It is not a lot of money. There's not a lot of real estate involved in it. It is something that's been done for as long as I've been in town, as a child and as a select person, so that's pretty much all I can tell you.
I think the answer would be that the effect of granting a tax exemption, obviously, is to remove the property from the grand list. So whatever the difference on the grand list is determines the difference in the taxes. Mr. Wickford.
I just want to say, I have a well. Nobody exempts my well, so why should the Aqueduct Society be exempt?
Well, did you ask?
I'm asking them.
It's got to be on the warning, Bob. That was a mildly critical comment. Further discussion of Article 10. Yes.
Rachel Cohen Lister. In the grand list, the Westminster Aqueduct Society, real value, $7,500.
Shocked.
Thank you.
Further discussion of Article 10. It's always fun when you can throw in some reality. Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 10 to see if the voters of the town of Westminster vote pursuant to VSA 32, section 3832, paragraph 7, to exempt the from taxation for a period of 5 years the real estate of the Westminster Aqueduct Society. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Article 10 is approved. Article 11. Mr. Beebe.
I move the article as warned.
Article 11, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster vote pursuant to VSA 32, section 3840. Those of you who are following along know this is a different section. To exempt from taxation for a period of 5 years the real estate of the Westminster Fire District Number 3. Is there a second to Article 11? Article 11 is moved and seconded. Discussion of Article 11. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving Article 11, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Article 11 is approved. Article 12, Mr. Beebe.
I move the article as warned.
Article 12, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster vote pursuant to VSA 32, section 3832, paragraph 7, to exempt from taxation for a period of 5 years the real estate of the Westminster Recreational Club, Inc. Is there a second to Article 12? Article 12 is moved and seconded. Mr. Beebe.
Any questions? It's the Westminster swimming pool located on Northbrook Road.
Further discussion of Article 12. Seeing none, all of those in favor of Article 12, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Article 12 is carried. Article 13. This is an article that's on by petition, so it will be moved by the select board member, but may be addressed by some other member who knows more about it, other member of the assembly. Anyway, Article 13, Ms. Harlow.
I move the article as warned.
Article 13, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum of $800 in addition to the sum $4,600 included in the budget proposed by the select board, making the total $5,400 for the support of the Westminster Gazette. You can see those numbers on page 17 of your town report. The Westminster Gazette's report is on page 88. Ms. Harlow, do you wish to speak to the article?
I thought Charmin Handy, she said there she is, okay.
Okay, Ms. Handy.
Hi, my name is Charmin Handy. I'm the board chairperson for the Westminster Gazette. First, would like to thank everybody for your support of the Gazette, whether it's a community member that's contributed articles, as a underwriter, as an advertiser, or just somebody that enjoys reading it. We do have copies in the back of the Gazette if you haven't seen one yet. There's also a write-up explaining sort of some of the financial and updates from this past year. This is the second year of the 3-year process where we have asked for an increase of $800 towards the Gazette. And we have a new, some of our expenses have changed just a little bit, so that's why we're asking for additional support. And again, just really appreciate your support of the Gazette.
Discussion of Article 13. Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 13, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Article 13 is approved. Article 14, Ms. Young. Article 14, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum of $500 in addition to the sum $2,500 included in the budget proposed by the select board, making the total $3,000 for the support of Southeastern Vermont Community Action, SEVCA, to assist Westminster in responding to the emergency needs of the community and providing all available and applicable services to families and individuals in need. Do you wish to speak, Ms. Young?
Well, just to say that this is the second petition year. If approved, they will need one more successful request at the same amount of money before they become part of our budget starting in July of 2021.
Mr. Stoddard.
Thank you. Nathan Stoddard. I was previously employed for SEVCA for 9 years. I was the operations manager for their weatherization department. I've seen firsthand throughout Wyndham and Windsor County. SEVCA, let me back up. SEVCA is a community, in case you don't know, is a community action agency. It's an anti-poverty, community-based nonprofit organization serving Wyndham and Windsor County. Their mission is to enable people to cope with and reduce the hardships of poverty, create sustainable self-sufficiency, and reduce the cause and move towards eliminating poverty. On page 80 in your town report, you can see they've spelled out what their services they've provided directly to Westminster residents. That amount of money that they provide to Westminster residents is a drop in the bucket to what they do within Wyndham and Windsor County. The $3,000 helps their objectives or their goals. The $5,000 is just an increase to better further those objectives. I believe they've asked for an increase for many years. I think they've been at $2,500 for as long as I can remember. But the $500 is just an add so they can help better keep up the pace with the need, continue forward with trying to eliminate the goal of poverty. There is a website also on there that has their full strategic plan and their annual report. So if you have any specific questions as to, like we've been talking about today, where money comes from, where money goes, it's clearly defined in those two reports. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Discussion of Article 14. Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 14, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Article 14 appears to carry. Article 14 does carry. Article 14 is approved. Article 15, a little explanation. Those two articles were agencies that had partial funding in the select board budget. We're now getting into articles for agencies that don't have funding in the budget up front. So these are starting from, that's why the other ones have those already and add on. These ones are just pure new funding. Mr. Hughes.
I move the article as one.
Article 15, shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the sum of $1,000 for the support of Senior Solutions, Council of Aging for Southeastern Vermont, Inc., to provide services to the aging and disabled residents of the town. Is there a second for Article 15? There's a second. Article 15 is moved and seconded. The budget page that it's on is also 17. The report is on page 79. Mr. Hughes, would you like to speak to the article?
Is there anyone here from him?
Anyone from Senior Solutions who would like to speak in favor? Yes.
Hi, I'm Ann White. I'm the community outreach nurse for Wyndham and Windsor County. A little bit about Senior Solutions. So Senior Solutions is requesting $1,000 for the town of Westminster. Our mission is to promote the well-being and dignity of older adults. Our vision is that every person will age in the place of their choice, with the support they need and the opportunity for meaningful relationships and active engagement in their community. Senior Solutions has served Wyndham and Windsor County since 1973. And our agency is seeking funds from the town because we've experienced a trend of decrease or fixed government funding while the population of older adults needing services has increased. Vermont has been remarkably successful in enabling frail elders who require a nursing home level of care to remain in their homes. However, one consequence of the state's success in that those needing services in their homes have far more significant health issues and require much more assistance with activities of daily living than in the past. So town support helps the agency to avoid waiting lists and to provide more services, which can strengthen the community safety net and reduce family stress and emergency calls. Some statistics from some of the programs that Senior Solutions has assisted Westminster residents. We have a senior helpline, which provides information and assistance, and we have serviced 98 calls and office visits to Westminster residents in the past year, as well as we've assisted 33 residents with Medicare assistance. In-home social services, we've provided 17 elder residents with in-home case management and other home-based services for 166 hours. Nutrition services and programs, 19 Westminster seniors received 2,289 meals at home through our partnership with Kernhattan. We also help fund a monthly congregate meal held at the Westminster Congregational Church. We also provide grants and funding for caregiver respite. And how the town funds are all used for the programs that I explained and many more. If you have any questions, there's some board members here.
Further discussion of Article 15. Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 15, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Article 15 is approved. Article 16, Ms. Harlow.
I move the article as warned.
Article 16, shall the voters of the town of Westminster appropriate the sum of $7,500 to be raised by taxation to support to support the cost of operation and maintenance of the Westminster Institute and Butterfield Library. Is there a second to Article 16? Yes, Article 16 is moved and seconded. Ms. Harlan.
This request is up from last year by $1,920. This is their first petition year, so if approved, they will need 2 more successful requests of the same amount of money before they become part of our budget starting in July of 2022. And I think Jim Matto would like to.
Mr. Matto.
Thank you. On behalf of the Institute Board of Managers, we really appreciate this funding. The Institute, some of you may know this, some may not. It's not a town building. It's owned by an organization called the Westminster East Parish, a kind of Louisiana-sounding name that the legislature came up with in the late 18th century. And in the late 19th century was given limited municipal authority, so can own a building, raise money, etc. And the Institute itself was dedicated in July of 1924, so we're coming close to it, the 20th anniversary. And the money and the drive to do that was led by a man named George Dascom, so you know that name for the Dascom Trust. And the Butterfield Library name comes because a man who lived and died in Boston named Isaac Butterfield spent part of his childhood in Westminster and left money for that purpose. So that's where that all comes from. And those people who set it up initially set up an investment fund that still is in existence today and still funds the majority of the budget, but not quite enough without depleting it, and we don't want to do that. We'd like it to be there for another 100 years. So what we've done recently, if you've been in the building lately, or when you go in to vote on Tuesday, you'll notice some things. The entryway has been upgraded, and we're trying to replace some of the 1950s and 60s types of changes that were made, lights, etc., with more period-appropriate pieces. You'll see some of those. If you go into the meeting room to the left of the gym when you're in there, you'll have a chance to see the improvements that are made in that room, which we think are quite substantial. And also put a plug in for Westminster Cares, which will be serving goodies in that room all day that day, so that's another reason to go in there. So we make a lot of changes in the building, and going forward, the gymnasium where you'll be voting is due for an upgrade, and we're looking to that in a few years. Outdoors, we've removed an underground oil storage tank, which was kind of a ticking liability, and it tested fine when it came out, so we're glad of that. A gazebo was generously donated by the Smith's family. That's been installed and will be able to be used this year. And we put in a stormwater drain because while the law says the state will control its own stormwater and not let it run onto your property, it doesn't seem to work that way. And it was undermining the driveway. So that was an expensive, but we hope worthwhile expense. And also, those of you who worry about your shock absorbers when you're parking out back, the parking lot was totally redone this year as well. And going forward, back on. Going forward, again through the generous support of the Dascom Trust this spring, we'll be replacing the pressure-treated timber frame rail that's in front of where you park out front with granite posts and chains that will be more appropriate to the original style of the building. We'd like to see it return to some of its original charm by the time the 100th anniversary rolls around. So we'll be doing some of that. And there's a lot more information in the annual report. It's on page 66 about the library, what's going on in the library specifically, which serves the entire town along with the Westminster West Library. That's very important. So we'll be happy to answer any questions people have. Take a look at the report inside. It's got a lot more info than that, but I don't want to take too much more time. Thanks.
Discussion of Article 16. Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 16, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Article 16 is approved. Article 17, Ms. Young.
I move the article is warned.
Article 17, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum of $3,000 for the support of the Westminster Historical Society. Is there a second for Article 17? It's moved and seconded. Discussion of Article 17. Ms. Young?
This is the second petition year. If approved, they will need one more successful request at the same amount of money before they become part of our budget, starting in July of 2021.
Further discussion of Article 17? Anyone from the society who wishes to further the conversation? Yes. Ms. Grandy.
I'm Ruth Grandy. I'm president of the Westminster Historical Society. For any of you folks here who have not been to view our museum, we hope to have it reopened again this summer following renovations that occurred in the upstairs area. What we found in some of the changes that took place are necessitating the replacement of some of the display cases due to the fact that at least one of them, the fourth leg, is a couple of bricks. And there are many of them that are cracked, and I think that we can display a whole lot more artifacts with upgraded, better quality, better lighting cases than what we have. And we also have expended a substantial amount of money in some of the preservation of the artifacts that we have that are in storage that we can't even display. And I think a better organization of the upstairs area would certainly be in our advantage, and we appreciate your support.
Further discussion of Article 17. Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 17, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Article 17 is approved. Article 18, Ms. Harlow.
I'll move the article as warned.
Article 18, shall the town of Westminster vote to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum of $2,500 for the support of Greater Falls Connections to provide substance abuse prevention programs to residents of the town. Is there a second for Article 18? We have the motion and a second. Discussion of Article 18, Ms. Harlow?
This is their second petition year. If approved, they will need one more successful request of the same amount of money before they become part of our budget starting in July 2021. Is there anyone here for Greater Falls Connection?
Yes.
My name is Jonathan O'Connor. I live in Westminster. I'm a board member for Greater Falls Connections. Unfortunately, I have my seat up here. Greater Falls Connections has been working with the community and with underserved people within the community to try and prevent substance abuse disorders going on. So they have regular meetings of various sub-organizations within their purview. Friends for Change being one of them. Help me out with that. Parks Place is another one. Above the Influence is a third one. So there's a number of different sub-organizations within them that they support, and we're trying to promote healthy lifestyles through not getting addicted to stuff. That's all I got. Thank you.
Further discussion of Article 18. Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 18, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Article 18 is approved. Article 19, Mr. Beebe.
I move the article as warned.
Article 19, shall the voters in the town of Westminster appropriate the sum of $9,534 to be raised by taxes for the support of Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategies, SEVEDS, to provide workforce and economic coordination services to the Wyndham region. Is there a second for Article 19? Yes, we have the motion and a second. Discussion of Article 19. Mr. Beebe?
This is their first petitioned year of this amount. If approved, they will need 2 more successful requests of the same amount of money before they become part of our budget.
I am sure that someone from Sevens is here to speak to this article.
Is there someone from Sevens to speak to the article?
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Sibilli. I'm the Director of Regional Strategies for BDCC and the Chief Coordination for the Sevens Board. Thank you for allowing us to speak today, and thank you for your investments in the region's economy through Sevens. Last year, nearly 75% of the Wyndham Region residents supported Sevens through their town funding. We couldn't do the work that we do there without the municipal investments throughout our region. We leverage the municipal dollars that we receive out for additional outside private, state, and federal dollars that we bring to the region. And with those dollars, we implement programs. What programs do we implement? Programs that have been developed through our 5-year planning process, comprehensive economic development strategy that looks at our data, our assets, and our challenges throughout the 27-town Wyndham region, and now throughout the 44-town Southern Vermont region, 54-town Southern Vermont region, to develop a 5-year plan to grow our economy. What are the major strategies in that plan? Really, to grow our workforce. And those are, I have a number of folks here that can speak to specific programs that we have developed, looking at that both within our schools, which is where we do a lot of work with the Westminster, entrepreneurial programs to help startup businesses and existing businesses grow and employ folks. And I think I could, I'll pause there in terms of description of the entity. We will be at 16 town meetings this year. We asked to go to all town meetings and update them. We think the regional approach to tackling our regional strategies is our best chance of success. We are asking for $3 per person at every town. Here that is $9,534. And as I said, we take all of those municipal dollars combined and leverage them into a number of different workforce programs. So with that, Mr. Moderator, I think I'll wait and see if there are any questions.
Okay. Further discussion of Article 19. Yes, Ms. Young.
I have basically one, and...
Okay, Mr. B, please.
Do you want to say something?
I did. I've just been, this has come to us now for several years, and we appreciate the presentation that you give. My problem here is I've just added up all the money that we have allocated for the various things in town, including the Greater Falls work that they do with people who need help, the Historical Society, the Council on Aging, and SEPCA, and that all comes to $9,500. And I'm just trying to find, I personally find that the amount that you are asking for is above that, and I think we just we're generous with our givings, but we give them to organizations that really need it because they're helping people. And this organization, while it's got a good, idea, does not come as close to our hearts as all the other money that we're giving. And that's just one. And these are 7 or 8. That's all. So last year I know that we cut the amount to something like $3,000 or $3,500. But I think that for us to give you more money than we're giving people that we really care about is something I don't approve.
Are you proposing an amendment, Ms. Young?
No.
No. Mr. Beebe?
No, as long as you spoke to it, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
Okay.
I will make the $3,000 to this article.
I'm not going to speak against her for this article, but I would go along with cutting this article to $3,000 or to whatever we funded it last year. $3,500, that would be an amendment that I would propose.
Mr. Beebe proposes to amend the amount to be allocated down to $3,500. Is there a second? It's moved and seconded to amend the amount of the appropriation down to $3,500. Discussion of the amendment. In the back. Yeah, no. Further back. Yes, thanks.
I'm just, what I'm understanding, I'm Cynthia Hughes, hello. What I'm understanding about this program is helping train young people in our communities to become effective business people, people in the workforce, people active in community. It sounds like a great program to me. So I'm not sure I understand the reasoning behind cutting the request to $3,500. Education is costly. Programs like this are costly to go into schools. I'm not part of this program at all. I just work with young people, and I do think it's important that we think about them in our community as well.
Further discussion of the amendment to reduce the dollar amount. Yes, Ms. Stoddard.
I'm not gonna go against the amendment, that's not what I just I wanna bring up at this point, I would like to know at some point what the board and the town manager are doing for planning within our administration for economic development and within our town itself. I don't hear a lot of talk about that at the board level. So if we're not willing to fund an organization that's doing that regionally for us, although we might not see a direct business come to town because of that, I would like to know what you guys are doing to support that growth within our own community, because we need someone to do it.
Your comment really isn't germane to the amendment, but perhaps.
Well, I said I wasn't going to change the amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment of reducing the amount. Yes, in the back.
Hi, Tatiana Schreiber, Westminster West. I just wanted to speak to the amount that they're asking. I went to the informational meeting at Westminster West that they held, and I remember last year, I believe I was the person who offered the amendment to reduce the amount. And so I went to that informational meeting to ask more questions. There were only about 3 of us who went to that meeting. So I think they did make an effort to try to come to our community to help explain what they're doing, and I think people do need to go to those kind of meetings to ask your questions. I asked a question about where the $3 per person came from, why that's the amount they're asking. And they didn't really have an adequate answer to that. They said they couldn't tell us why that was the figure. It's just, that's what they do. And they thought it would be unfair to ask less from different towns. It was just a matter of equity that they asked the same amount from all the towns. But they didn't seem to be bothered by the fact that our town decided, for the reasons Toby said, that we should reduce the amount, because for us it doesn't make sense to provide so much more money to that organization than all the other organizations that we support. So I think that I support the amendment. I think we should offer less because it makes more sense for us in terms of our priorities to pay less. Oh, I did want to say one other thing. I asked what kind of services they provide, and they do provide a service for small business entrepreneurs who want to meet with them for free. You can get advice on grants that you can apply for and other ways that they help you with business plans and things like that. So that seemed like a valuable service for many of us who have multiple jobs and maybe starting some kind of small business. So I support the amendment.
Further discussion on Article 19? Yes, of course, on the other side of the hall.
Hi, Marion Major. I would just like to bring into context that we are, in fact, not an island and part of the broader region, and I think supporting regional initiatives and organizations is really very valuable for us as a community in trying to bring economic development to our town and to the surrounding towns, which we all go to and work in, play in, shop in. So I think it's very important to keep that context in mind and important to support that. I also wanted to add the thought that while other organizations might be addressing more emergency cases, it's difficult to see economic development in the same ways. However, it is caring for the people that we care about in the future. So, thank you.
Further discussion on Article 19? You ready for the question? We got a hand in the back. Mr. Heck.
I feel like I say this every year, but again, I went to the Vermont Chamber annual conference, and again, it was alarming, and our governor has stated this over and over again, but there's only one county in the state of Vermont births outweigh deaths. Chittenden County. One. We are a declining populace. We have a workforce that's aging. We need to bring in new, younger folks to our workforce. I see it in my work every day. And what Sevens does is unbelievable. And I'm voting in favor of the money that's going to them. We need workforce. Just go home and think about deaths outweighing births, what that impact will have on this great state of ours.
Further discussion. We're still on the amendment, so it's still about what level the funding would be. The amendment is to bring it down to $3,500. Anything specific on that? We vote the amendment, or seeing nobody dying to speak? We'll give you another crack at it. I have to say my experience with you representatives of Sevens is when they speak again, they repeat the same thing they said before. So if you've got something new, that would be great.
Thank you. I just want to respond briefly to the difference in some of the work that we're doing. The size of the challenges that we are facing, as you've heard some speakers allude to, is very great. Our ability to change things like demographics, it's very, very hard, particularly in a rural state like ours. In order to do that, we really have to work together. That is the point of this. And so we think that this funding actually touches each and every person in this community in one way or another, either through a job, through impacts to your property taxes potentially, if we're helping, create momentum to grow Grand List, or through programs to start businesses. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again.
Further discussion of the amendment. Yes, Mr. Clark.
David Clark, Westminster. My other role here is I'm a member of the Union High School Board, and also on behalf of the high school board, a member of River Valley Technical Center. I will point out, as I think Mr. Hackett alluded to just a few minutes ago. We have more jobs than we have people to fill them. And that is partly demographics, and it's partly because we have an economy which economists would like to describe at this point as a zero unemployment economy, because even though there is unemployment, it's the segment of the population which is very difficult to employ. I mentioned my other roles here just a moment ago, and as Ms. Sebelia is well aware, they are once again the high school and River Valley Technical Center, and I've been on that board since it became an independent district 10 or 12 or 14 years ago. CEVEDs, in my experience, is rarely seen in this building except at town meeting time. And in the 10 or 12 or 14 years that I've been a member of the River Valley Technical Center board and its predecessor, which is an advisory board in Springfield, we haven't seen them at all. So I appreciate the fact that they were able to get 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe it's 5 reps out here to tell us all about it. But I would have to support the amendment based on what I have seen in personal experience, which has been very little of CEVEDs.
Further discussion on the amendment? Yes, of course.
Thank you, David. It's always hard for me to get recognized. I'm the chair of the high school board, and he is absolutely right. I'm the biggest supporter, probably as anybody around here, of the youth in this community and what we need to do to support them. But I haven't seen much of these folks, and I've been on the board for a long time, and I think we need to at least support the amendment.
Further discussion of the amendment? Yes. Mr. Lund, in the back.
Can we just call a question?
You may call the question. Requires a second. Is there a second? Plenty of seconds. It's non-debatable, 2/3 majority. We are calling the question solely on the amendment right now to go down to $3,500. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. It's a non-debatable. That's what we're voting. The amendment is...
People will be confused for what they're voting.
All right. Do you want to vote the amendment? Please say aye. Aye. Do you not want to vote the amendment? Say nay. The vote is in favor of voting the amendment. Are you in favor of the amendment? Please say aye. Aye. Are you opposed to the amendment? Please say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is approved. But back to the main article. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster appropriate the sum of $3,500 to be raised by taxes for the support of CEVEDs to provide workforce and economic coordination services in the Wyndham region. Are you ready for that question? Further discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 19 as amended, please say aye. Excuse me. Yeah. Yes? Yes.
Okay.
Barry Shamus, Westminster West. I wonder if, to the point that they haven't seen CEVEDs in the high school, is due to our reduced funding. So that's my question to the representative.
I guess we're suspending the vote while we answer a question.
Hi there. My name is Christy Beatty, and I work for BDCC. I'm the Pipelines and Pathways Coordinator. I work within all 4 of the Wyndham County high schools to connect students to career awareness, preparedness, and jobs. Now, I have been in the school since September, and we've worked with the entire freshman class developing resume writing skills. I just was here this week working directly with Mark Gibo, who is the guidance counselor. We offer for the entire sophomore class a sophomore summit where students come from around Windham County and they identify a career cluster that they're interested in, and then they actually go to this fun full-day workshop where they get to interface with local employers in that career cluster and connect with them, ask the employers, what's necessary in order to get those jobs. And then for the juniors and seniors this year, we're starting a new plan, which is...
Excuse me, please. There was a specific question asked, none of which you have addressed yet. Could you address the question?
Sure, could you repeat the question?
Which is the reduced funding the causing the lack of appearance in the school?
We spend as much time here as at any other schools. So I'm literally here weekly. And I'm not sure, if the school board hasn't seen me here, but I have a quote from the guidance team in support of us, so.
So I'm taking the answer to Ms. Shamus's question is no. Is that correct? Okay. Further discussion of Article 19. Hands? I'm not seeing hands. Let's get back to the vote. All of those in favor of Article 19 as amended to the $3,500, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The Article 19 is passed as amended. Article 20, Mr. Allen.
I move the article as warned.
Article 20, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum not to exceed $10,000 to create a probability study for the possible purchase of a parcel. The alliteration is almost killing me. The parcel of land with a house and a commercial building for the purpose of sand and gravel processing, approximately 154,000 cubic yards available. Is there a second Article 20? Can you get a second? We must have a second, right? Article 20 is moved and seconded. Mr. Allen.
Obviously, I got the short straw, so I'd like to make a deal where if people would just say yes, we can move on and go home early. But I don't think that's going to work.
Are you calling the question?
Nice. And I wanted to say, Katie, they're calling you about that now. Let me just give you a quick history of where we're at. Since I've been here, which is probably too long, but according to you anyways, we've been getting sand and gravel and everything mostly from Dummerston pit, and which has been, I've been here going on 16 years, but I know Mark was here to tell you it's been longer than that. And what happened was Putney and Dummerston got together and actually bought the pit. And so now this is the first year kind of like where we don't have access to a reliable sand pit. We tried a couple of them, we're not real happy with the sources. And then when we started doing research, we realized that it's a major problem that's going on with southern Vermont. Is to actually make sand, for example, is very expensive because you're making it out of ledge and everything. So the quality of sand, the gravel and all that, we've been scrambling to try to find it, along with a lot of other towns. And now we're facing what we're seeing is our use is going up every year, whether you want to call it climate change or not. But we've been actually, this year, for example, we were well past 1 year's supply. We're heading towards a year and a half because of all the rain and the freezes, and then we're sanding, and you people want to get around on the roads, can't blame you. We need to find a source of where we're going to get the sand and gravel down the road. It's alarming because we're not by ourselves. We did research. Chucky did a lot of the work here when he's working on it right along. But I asked him to put together a list of where can we go. And basically what he came up with is anywhere from 18-minute drive all the way to a 35-minute drive to go get the fill of the sand and gravel and crushed stones that we're using is really starting to be harder and harder to find a good reliable pit.
The one thing that we do know that we've been started out with is how much do we use? And Russ went back with Chuck and actually did research and came up with an average, and we've been, for the last 7 years, we've been using a total, and I'll break it down a little bit because there's a difference between crushed gravel, which is what everybody's asking to fix the roads with, sand to sand the road when we're stuck and need to get through, and crushed stone when we're trying to keep the runoff. We've been using 2,700 cubic yards every year of crushed gravel, 5,000 yards every year of sand, and about 1,400 yards of stone. Then when you do the math, we've been paying like $11, $9, and $14, and it's costing us, when you add it all up, an average of about $95,000 if I round the numbers off, for us to maintain the roads for the supply. That's not counting the cost to go get it or to have somebody haul it in. That's just and that's the average, and it hasn't, if anything, it's gonna go up every year on it. We came across a chance, and this place is a building and site that's in, it's in Rockingham, but it's almost in Chester on 103. It's easy to access, it's about a 13-minute drive. The gentleman that owned it decided that he wants to retire sooner or later, and what first we started looking at it is that it was a gravel pit all the way around it. It was Rockingham's old gravel pit, they still are there. They're on the back side of it. The other side of the road, there was 2 other gravel pits, but also they're starting to dry up. We looked at it initially and just did a couple of samples, and what we saw looked good, but we really need to take and explore more to see what it really is there for gravel and sand. And what we ended up coming up was what we calculated, basically is 154 cubic yards there, which would take us about 17 years to actually supply us. The phone is actually breaking my concentration, that's pretty good. Anyways, what we want to do is, what we're here for today is to ask for $10,000 to pursue it. We're not asking to buy the gravel pit, we're asking you to allow us to pursue it. And how it's broke up is that we need $4,500 to go do a sample. They would come in for 1 day and do test bores, they would come back and also in that cost is to give us the results. Well, we're looking to see, is there really good gravel and sand in this particular piece of land? If it comes back and it's not any good, then we wasted $4,500 to explore it. If we find out that for $4,500 it comes back and it says it's really good material, and then what we're asking for a total of $10,000, the other $3,500 in the cost is basically going to be, well, actually it's a little bit more than that, obviously, but it's basically going to be to actually try to negotiate the contract to see. The gentleman's asking $600,000 for it right now. I'm not even sure if it's worth that or not, I'll be honest with you, but they're negotiable. I think it's all going to depend on what the material is. There is a building on it, there's a house on it, so all that would have to be negotiated too. We'd probably be anywhere from 5 to 8 years before we'd have to do something with the buildings. And there again, you can ask a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions to ask. What we're trying to do right now is just to ask for $10,000, not to exceed it, to explore to see if this is a realistic possibility for this pit. I'll entertain questions, but if anybody, I can also put pictures of it if you're unsure where it is. But it's right next to, if you're going to Chester on 103, it's right next to the old police barracks, if you know where the old police barracks is. Also, that gentleman has approached us also. He wants to, he just bought it. It's a driving school for tractor trailer training. He would like to retire in 10 years, and he was asking if in 10 years he would like to sell his maybe too. That would also be part of the negotiation, which he borders, they're all part of the same land. Anyways, I'll entertain any questions right now.
Any questions related to Article 20? Yes.
This ready to go? Yes, yes it is. I guess my biggest question is, what's the competition going to be to buy this? I'm very familiar with both sites, and I'm also pretty familiar with the needs of other towns similar to ours. Though it looks to me like the biggest challenge is not the dollars, but the competition that may outbid us. Have you looked at that part, that aspect of it?
Yes, we're not in a bidding war as of yet. He gave us his word, it's on hold. He was asking $600,000. He's willing to finance it for that price, so he's willing to negotiate how it works on the contest. But right now, until we tell him no, we have first rights to it. He didn't. That was his first thing, was he was giving us first rights. Yes, there's other people who are interested, but I don't think anybody's going to do anything until we see the test bores too, though, to be honest with you.
Further discussion, Ms. Dearborn.
So a couple of things that I just want to mention. If you're looking at an investment for the town that's $600,000 and you've got to spend a little money to figure out if it makes sense, there's some due diligence that I think happens before you even get to that point. And so I took it upon myself to do some of that due diligence and to look at how much material we were using, to take the figure of $154,000 that had been provided to me, to look at the actual 3 acres where the building and the garage is. I spent a little bit of time talking to some folks that are in the industry just to better educate myself so I could make my own determination. A couple of things I just want to point out. If you have an investment of $600,000 and there's truly 154,000 yards of material, if you do the mathematical equation, that means that the material is approximately $4 a yard. In order for us to deal with that material, you have to have somebody process it, so you're going to add $5 a yard. From that point, you have to have a stripping that happens to even get to it. That's about $1 a yard. You have $2 for reclaiming. That, I think, brings us up to maybe $12 a yard. I'm fairly certain that the material that we're purchasing at this point is below that. I'm in finance. I'm very interested in the numbers and the investment. Some of the financials that I did see that were provided by the town, because I took interest in it, was indicating there was a revenue that was going to be coming from renting the buildings. You can't rent the buildings if you need the material that's underneath it. So at the end of the day, when I've done my financial calculation, I don't think it makes financial sense. I don't think that we should be spending $4,500 or $10,000 investigating something that bare bones doesn't make financial sense. If the board or anyone from the town of Westminster has financials to share that will show that it makes sense, I would be interested in securing money for any kind of study. The other thing that I want to mention is I keep hearing that we're running out of material. There's not enough material. The material that we have around us isn't good material. If we are truly concerned about not being able to access material in the future, it wouldn't make sense to buy this property and start processing the material. It would make sense to buy this property and hold on to it. That makes it even more unattractive from a financial perspective. To buy it, to have to pay tax on it, to hold on to it. I know we were all given the opportunity to look at a quarry. I know that we voted that down years ago. If we're looking for some type of long-term solution and solve for a material crisis, I think that we would be better off looking at a quarry that would cost you a fraction of this purchase price and then be able to have a long-term plan. So based on the information that I've taken a look at, that I've processed, I am not in favor of this article. I think there's more due diligence that our select board can do in regards to the financial implications to purchasing something like this. There's a lot of unknowns with gravel pits. I think there's a lot of information that can be gathered, and I encourage you all to vote no on this.
Wish to be heard?
Obviously, Katie and I have had conversations before, and obviously we did numbers here, and the numbers for us look good, but you know what? It goes right back to where this is not a signed contract. We're not coming to you to tell you what we're going to pay for. If I can't answer her questions in a reasonable manner, it is not going to fly. But my whole thing is I need to have this test done to see if it is, and then go back and negotiate. We might come back and say, hey, it's actually good gravel, but he's asking too much. And until we actually go back and negotiate with them, but the problem was, I didn't have approval of the town to do that. I need approval of the town to actually sit down with them, and the only way I can do is say, yes, they blessed a $10,000 to go investigate it with you, and that's what I'm asking for.
Further discussion of Article 20. Yes, Ms. Shawns.
I'm curious as to what's behind the $10,000 for the study, and whether or not you're looking at contaminated materials on the property, because I know that would really also create a much greater extent of cost. And is there any? Has that question been asked at all as to this particular site?
I didn't understand your question, I guess.
Have you considered whether or not there are contaminated materials at this site? Is that at all within the realm of possibility?
That's part of the $10,000. They're gonna do bore samples and then find out if it is, then they're gonna come in and see after the bore samples, if they do pass, is basically to do the contamination study, which is part of all the permits you need, okay? We did an initial study to realize that we don't believe we need like the Act 250, we don't need that, but we really can't tell you that until we actually have a firm come in and do it. But yes, your question is, we're obviously not gonna do anything until it passes this test.
Do you understand how those contamination studies will exponentially grow if they find something? So will it be just a cap? So if you find something of some contamination there, then and you've already spent your $10,000, and then that ends all the studies?
Basically, yeah, you would, right, that'd be part of, multiple things could end at 10,000. Not getting a permit could end at 10,000. You see what I'm saying? That's all part of the $10,000 is we'd have to invest in the worst cases, we'd come back and say we just wasted $10,000. The best cases, I'd come back to you and say, it's clean, it's done, it's gonna work, and this is what we pay for it to make the numbers work. Okay, but it's all part of the 10,000 to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on Article 20. Yes, in the back. So, Mr. Stanley.
Peter Stam, Bemis Hill. I'm just curious to know about the sequence of events and if the $10,000 were to be approved and the price was agreed upon, when would that be decided? When would we be voting on the $600,000 or whatever price that might be? And does it make more sense to go to contract subject to? I mean, a handshake and somebody saying that they've given us first right is nice, but a verbal agreement is worthless, especially if it turns out that it's more valuable than that. So if we were to go to subject to the approval, it might make more sense. And I'd also like to know about where the $600,000 is going to come from and when that would be decided.
One is the $600,000, he's willing to finance it for that price, so I'm not sure, which would mean when you get done, he'd do it over 10 years, $60,000 a year for 10 years is what that's part of what he originally offered as a negotiation.
Would that not take the town's approval?
That's correct. All that would take approval.
So
We'd have to
when would we decide on that? Next year at town meeting, or would there be a special
No, I
town
think it
meeting?
would be before then. I was actually hoping that, it's a slim possibility we could do the bore samples between now and this next budget, next meeting we'd have in 45 days, but I can't promise you that. Just give you an update. It still wouldn't be ready to come to you for a vote. It wouldn't be ready for a vote in probably, I don't know, maybe fall or something. We'd have to come back to the town for a vote.
So it might make more sense to go to contract now, subject to the approval, which would be the contract.
Before we did the 10,000, I would have to have a contract written up that he's going to allow us to do the sample, and that he would hold it until X.
Correct.
That's correct.
So we'd be spending the $10,000 knowing that we had it under contract and it wasn't going to be taken out from under.
That's correct. Before we even spent the 4,500 of the 10.
Okay.
Okay.
Further discussion. Ms. Mitchell?
So I went and talked to Russ about this, and he showed me photos of what was done with the testing so far. There's a lot of water-washed rock in that he said they would crush for fixing the roads. My question is, who's going to do the crushing? Who's going to oversee that business? And does that make the town the owner of a business that we now have to oversee, and we're having trouble overseeing our budget as it is? And also, the taxes, I believe, were something like $8,000 a year to be paid to Rockingham. I don't know. I just wonder about this tax situation between Westminster and Rockingham. We're back to there again. Could someone please clarify this?
They'll hopefully be part of the 10,000. We can't come back to you until we actually have a written agreement with all the permits, what's there for gravel, what's the source. We can at least get an estimate of how much is going to be sand, how much is going to be crushed rock, what's the supply there, on top of the fact that, yeah, you know, you could say that it's being taxed at 85 because of the house and the building. We would have to get agreement with Rockingham, what they're going to tax once the house and building is gone. I assume it's going to be less, but we'd actually have to come up with that agreement.
So answer the question about the town becoming the owner of, I guess, a business, because there's got to be somebody there crushing.
We're going to hire, Chuck, is it once a year we would hire? Yeah, once a year we would hire a firm that comes in and actually crushes it to give us the supply, and then we're not selling it. If we were selling, we're a business. Outside of that, we're not a business.
So the crushing would be a limited time span
That's correct.
of roughly how long do you
Chuck,
guess?
how long would it take for them once a year to come to crush it? He said a week and a half.
Further discussion on Article 20. Up in the back, Ira. All the way back.
Hi, Elisa Albidino. I'm just curious how much the land is assessed for currently?
Was it 385? It's not 600, that's right. It is. Was it 332 or 385? I couldn't remember. 332, sorry. It's being appraised right now at 332. That's with the buildings on it and everything else.
Mr. Mata.
Two questions, clarification basically, based on Mr. Snamp's questions, discussion on that. One is, does that $10,000 include the development of an Act 250 application? If that is it more than 10 acres? Was one question I had.
Russ and Chuck both investigated, and what we had a verbal conversation that it didn't need an Act 250. We now would need it in writing.
Did or did not?
Does he? Chuck, do you have it confirmed now?
Okay. No, it's probably not less than 10 acres in Rockingham. Yeah. The other question I had was, we're talking about an article that would provide spending this money after July 1st, and it sounded like there was some discussion of doing it sooner than that.
Good point. Good point. We've been able to actually mess this all up pretty good, but yes, we might have to wait till July 1st. Oh, but hopefully that when we come back at the next meeting, we get a budget approved, we'll figure it out.
Okay, further discussion, I think we got up in the back here.
Hi, Jason Smith. Craig, I saw a packet information, I can't remember, but I believe at the end there was a total savings towards the town on cost savings on aggregate at the end of that 17 years if we used all this material. What was that figure?
Well, you know, that's taken in, that was the report that we did, and we took into account of gift rental from the property and all that. But it's, the last number was 269, but, you know, going back to what I was originally looking at, it's cost us $94,300 a year to go purchase it, have somebody that we actually buy it from. And what we figured out, to run the machine, to actually have it crushed, it runs $5 a yard for it to hire somebody in. And that's so that we calculated if somebody gave us this piece of property, it would cost us $45,000 a year. We had no expenses other than, like say, we owned the land free and clear, which means we'd be saving like $48,000 a year in savings because we wouldn't be buying, we'd be owning it. Now in that $48,000, we got to pay that $600,000, so obviously there's some calculations that we got to do in there. But right up front, if we ended up owning it and we got all done with it outside of a few $1,000s a year for taxes, that's kind of the same as what we were originally looking. I don't think it's really all the total savings. It's just having access to good sand and gravel that I'm more worried about, to be honest with you. Obviously, we don't want to pay a lot more for it either, but so we got to come back and show you that it's a good product. It's something that we can use for the next 17 years and then make the numbers work.
I'm not going to call you on until other people get to speak. Over here are...
Barb Hodgkins. Once the gravel are depleted and you find the end of the use of the gravel pit, would you then be able to turn over the land and sell it?
Hopefully that's
Think about that too then.
Yeah, you know, the last thing that I personally would ever want to do is buy something. I mean, for us to own the land and the house is not a really good idea. So I went in with kind of an attitude right away, why the heck are we doing this? But we're down to not a lot of choices, and then when you get figuring it all out, that when we're all done, if we can take care of ourselves for even 15 years, and then walk away with a piece of land that we could actually recoup some of our costs, we're going to probably need that to go invest in another gravel pit. But hopefully it won't be I won't be around then to make that decision.
Further discussion. Mr. Stoddard, we haven't heard from you on this one.
Thank you. A few things, I guess. The 10,000 says for a probability study. Now that means to study the probability of that being a viable project. It doesn't include, Craig, you said 3,500, but if you take 10 minus your 45 for your estimate to do your study, that's 5,500 left over for your handshake deal. So that's a deposit. So 5,500 is for a deposit. The answer to the other question, the property is currently appraised at 332, like we said. That holds $58,000 in that appraisal is their land value. Town of Rockingham has that land valued at $58,000. If you pull the house and the barn off of there, that piece of land's worth $58,000 on the retail market. Real quick, I do property appraisals. I do property appraisals for towns. on a townwide scale. We recently did a reappraisal in a town near here that had 3 gravel pits in it. We were tasked with valuing the materials coming off of that as a value to that property. We took one of the properties that sold, we knew what it was valued at, it had a sale price. That sale price included a gravel value to it. We then backed that number into what per acre value for gravel is. And we worked it with all 3 properties, and it's about $15,000 an acre. So if you have 3 acres at $58,000, 2 acres are possibly a viable gravel pit, that's $30,000. Your appraised value is $88,000 for that piece of property, plus your buildings, but we're going to tear the buildings down. So my first point is yes, it looks like it makes sense when you draw a scale of what we're spending and what the $600,000 is going to be and what the $770,000 is going to be to crush it, and taxes and other costs, we're going to get money back possibly from rent, whatever, it looks good. But on a value scale, you're paying $300,000 per acre for 2 acres of gravel. I applaud Chuck and everybody who's done their due diligence to find a place for gravel. Makes perfect sense to secure our needs of gravel. Perfect sense. But there has to come a point to where value of what you're purchasing comes into play. Real quick, to the resale of it, the excavation depth of that property, according to some a land survey that I saw, is about 30 feet. Nobody's going to buy a 3-acre parcel 30 feet below grade with an expended gravel pit of 44 acres behind it. Doesn't matter, 3 acres expended gravel pit, we're going to end up paying taxes for the rest of our lives on $28,000, so it's not that big a deal. Anyways, I guess what I would do is offer an amendment after that and say that the amendment be for the $4,500 for the actual feasibility study. Then if it's a viable project, come to us with a plan of how we're going to purchase it instead of a backdoor handshake.
I guess I don't have a problem with that, other than if it turns out to be good gravel and sand, I guess we're coming back to another meeting to find out where you want to go, but.
Could I, first I need to get a second on Mr. Stoddard's amendment. Do we have a second? You guys. Hey, Russ. Quiet. I need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. His amendment is moved and seconded. Now, discuss.
Hey, can you repeat the amendment?
The amendment is to reduce the amount to $4,500, which Nate used the word feasibility study, not probability, but either way, just reduce the amount to $4,500.
I guess I need some input into this. Russ, where did you just say 5,500? I'm a little confused on that. Say.
He's assuming that $5,500 is
Nate, did you say, Russ, I think he's confused with what you said. Right here, here's the breakdown. Did you say $5,500?
I'm only going off of, you said 45 is the feasibility study.
So the breakdown of the $10,000 as we have it right now is $4,500 for coring and soils analysis from a actual service that we asked for. We of course put it out to bid. Then the other $3,500 that we know we would need to spend, and it is an estimate, includes building values, limited building structure assessments, property values with area comparisons, and estimated resale value of the property once the gravel was over, so that we could come to you with a complete package, not an estimate on when we're done, what is it worth? That's what the other 3,500, and that is only 8,000. There's still $2,000 if we wanted to, if we found that there was a real issue with hazardous materials, we could do a preliminary and then back out and say, no, we're not interested in this property and move on. So that's what the 10,000 was estimated for.
So discussion on Mr. Stoddard's amendment to reduce the amount to $4,500. Yeah, Ms. Dearborn.
Reluctantly to me. Question, the amount of money for the boring samples to test, did I hear Craig say, did you say that that would also include the environmental piece?
No.
Okay.
No.
So really just boring down to see if we have good soil, right?
And they give us the results.
Okay, so we did some digging at the site already, am I correct in saying that? I read that in the minutes, and everyone was raving about how great the soil was.
But
Am
that's
I
just
correct?
a backhold.
Okay.
It's not a qualified.
I still am scratching my head as to why we want to invest money in something that financially doesn't make sense on paper. And I know that a gentleman talked about the savings being almost 300,000. That worksheet that you saw, I have. And it talks about having a revenue source for 10 years from those rental properties. I don't understand how we can have a revenue source from those rental properties if we need to access the material below. So any figures that were shared with a select group of us are really inaccurate. So if anyone did see them, I would caution you in taking those in absolutes, because I don't think that they're 100% accurate. I think there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. Further, Ms. Stoddard, do you want to be heard?
I need to back up. When Craig was talking about, so I'm at the 10,000 and I'm at the amendment that Nate made to 4,500. I heard 4,500 and then some amount of money going to the owner
No.
to secure the property.
I don't know who said that, but it wasn't me.
Okay.
Nate said that, I guess.
We heard that, and you said it to me the other day when I talked to you too. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. So we don't need to give him any money. So we're really at $8,000.
Right, and that's why I was gonna say it didn't add up, just because we have 2,000 extra
And
in there.
the 2,000 extra is for just in case we need to do something.
There you go, that's all it was. Okay. I mean, the only one we're sure of is the 4,500, because that's, Chucky, right? You called and got a contract to do it for one day, and that's what they were gonna do. So that's actually a known what it is. We're coming up with estimates, what it's gonna cost us to go through the value evaluation and limited bill, all the other stuff of 3,500. Then we put another 2 in, just in case we're missing something, okay?
Yeah, right down here first. We've got a couple more behind.
Thank you. I'm the same person I was when I talked 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, and who was that? How am I supposed to know?
Rick Schoonover, Deer Run. I've been on this property, I don't know, a couple hundred times, I guess. I've sold a lot of logs to Hanson Savage. That particular building that's on there that the person rents, there's traffic going in and there all the time, so that's really a non-issue as far as that rental property being used for 10 years in traffic and all that sort of thing. The other thing, the bulk of this property is above the highway. So talking about going down 30 feet is not correct. You're probably going down maybe half that feet. So the retail value of that property is difficult to ascertain at this time, but it's not going to be a piece of property that's 30 feet below the highway. That's not going to happen. It's not the way that property lies. Personally, I think we all need to remember one very important fact. This town, select board, and highway department has an obligation to keep our highways as safe as we can over the next 10 or 15 years. And things are going to change in this gravel pit business because there is not a lot of gravel available, and we need to keep that in mind also. I'm very much in favor of this project. I'm surprised at where it was, because I didn't know about it till today. But I do know the gravel that's on the Rockingham pit back there, and I fully expect that what's going to be underneath Hanson Savage Garage is going to be probably the same thing. There's been trucks in and out of there for quite some time. they've trucked logs for me for at least 25 years, so I'm sure there's going to be some spill of diesel fuel and oil on that property. What it affects our gravel remains to be seen. But I think $10,000 to find out exactly where we're at is a damn cheap thing, and it's very wise on the part of the select board and the highway department to go this particular route. So I'm very much in favor of this, and I think we need to look at the long-term effects of what this is going to do for our town. $10,000 is pretty darn cheap. Thank you.
I think further back up, I had a couple of hands. Yes.
I'm Team Bielski, I'm from Westminster. It just makes me nervous as a person who's going to be here for much longer than 15 years to hear someone on the select board say that it's, maybe in 15 years it won't be solvent anymore, but that's okay, because it seems like paying twice the amount of an appraised value for something that is then going to be worth even less after we've been done with it, and then we're going to be stuck with it for years and years afterwards, is short-sighted. Even if we're looking 15 years ahead, I want to know what's going to happen 20 years ahead, and I don't want to be paying for that piece of property in my taxes for the foreseeable future.
Okay, further discussion on Mr. Stoddard's amendment. Let's pick up this one on the way down, and then we'll get to Barb.
Hi, Rachel Cohen again. If I understood correctly from the beginning of your explanation, the 4,500, after the 4,500 analysis, there's a no-go point. So if that analysis doesn't show the quality that the town needs, then any further monies are not going to be spent anyway. And at that point, we still wouldn't have the information that we need from the further expenditure to know whether it works out financially or not. So we're not saying spend $10,000 regardless of what you find. If I'm understanding correctly, after the analysis is done, if it's not good, we stop, we look somewhere else. So it seems like the amendment is saying, then we have to come back and talk about this all over again, but we still won't have the information that we need to know whether it makes financial sense to go forward.
That's correct. It's 4,500 just, and if it comes back and we all assume that, hey, this is just not gonna work, it's not good gravel or whatever it is. The 3,500 was legit. I mean, we really gotta go and afterwards and do some studies to see the answer what Katie's asked and what everybody's asking, to see is this not contaminated, can we get the permits and all that. So it could cost up to $10,000, but hopefully at $10,000 we're coming back to you saying, hey, in that $10,000 we're coming back to ask you to buy the gravel pit one way or the other. At 4,500 it never, well, we're just going to tell you it didn't work out.
Ms. Taylor.
Hi, Barbara Taylor. I was working at the town hall in Putney when they had this big discussion about buying the pit in Dummerston. My question to the board is, we're not the only town that's looking for gravel, and I'm assuming that you've done diligence and maybe contacted Putney, Dummerston to see how that's working. Are there any other towns that we could collaborate with? Maybe there are some small towns that are in the same boat we are, and maybe we can hook up with them.
We've talked about that as a possibility. If we owned the pit, obviously we could actually, share it with another town, but it's not that big of a supply if you look at it. It is for us for 15, 17 years, but if you bring another town in that's that quick, I don't know why, go back to what Katie said, maybe we want to sit on it for a while just because we got other sources. I don't know, all those are good questions that we got to come back to you with an answer. I know I've talked to, Cynthia was there when they did Putney and everything. I haven't heard anything that's gone wrong there, but I think they did the right thing. That was $1 million each, was a lot of money, but they had to secure it. But we're going to have to come back with those answers.
Further discussion on Mr. Stoddard's amendment. Yes, up on the side here.
understanding why we're on the hook for even the $4,500. Now, there may be, this is a normal practice, but I don't understand it. Is the landowner willing to split that $4,500 with us or anyone else to say his property is worth this, especially at the inflated amount that's being discussed? Why are we on the hook for the investigation?
I never asked him, to be honest with you. I don't know why he would do that, but I guess you can ask him. Somebody's got to pay $4,500, and we're approaching his land. He's got it on hold for us. Don't know the answer to that, I guess.
Mr. Gregg.
John Gregg, I'm certainly supportive of spending the money, especially if that's what our highway folks say is a good idea. But I was going to ask about regionalization too. It did occur to me, if this is next to what was Rockingham's pit, would they have already sort of assessed this property and said it was, wouldn't have worked for them? And then just also, maybe this isn't quite what Sevitz and EDCC do, but it seems like there's a regional issue here, and maybe there are 5 towns that if they each spent $100,000 for gravel, you could have a business that was selling $500,000 worth of this stuff. So maybe that's something you all could help solve a problem for a bunch of towns. Thank you.
Further discussion on Mr. Stoddard's amendment to chop this down to $4,500. Yes, and here, Ms. Deutsch.
Eileen Deutsch. What's our next alternative to finding gravel?
I wish I had a plan right now. We're still trying to, we don't have a contract with anybody right now, right, Chuck? Right. And do we even have a year of sand left? Yeah. We don't even have 1 year left anymore. Right. It's been a tough year. We normally try to keep 2 to 3 years, and we've already been a year and a half. And, a pile that was 2 or 3, we're into it for a year and a half. So this is a quicker decision than we thought originally, because when we moved out of Dummerston, we actually bought extra sand, to stockpile it. And but now we've had a bad year, and thank God we did buy the extra. We're going over to JP over in Ackworth and getting some sand and gravel right now. Chuck, are we going anywhere else? Yeah.
We haven't bought any road sand since Dummerston and Putnam bought the road sand.
Yeah.
We bought some out of Basic Brothers locally, they make a recycle. No, not an issue.
It seems to be the sand is more of a problem because you can man-made crush gravel and crush rocks because you just use ledge and everything. We have access to that. It's the sand is normally, it's natural sand is what it is. To find a pit that actually you can screen it and take the stones and the rocks out and make gravel and stone and also get sand is what we saw there. That's why we were looking at it. And I'm concerned more about sand than anywhere else. To find good, clean sand that we put on a road is hard to come by.
Mr. Major, Stephen Major.
It sounds like the amendment to allocate only $4,500 for this would not allow the select board to answer the big questions of should we do this. And so I would urge that we defeat the amendment and get on to the main question, which would then allow sufficient funds, the $10,000, to come back with an actual answer for a subsequent town meeting of whether to purchase this parcel.
Are you calling the question on the amendment?
Sure.
Is there a second to that? There's a bunch of seconds. All those in favor of voting on the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Is there further? No, actually, we go straight to the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed to the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Excuse me. Nays, nays, nays. I believe the nays have it. The nays do have it. The amendment fails. The article stands at $10,000 for a probability study. Is there further discussion of the main motion of Article 20? Yes, Mr. Stoddard.
Real quick, like I said before, I'm in favor of doing something. I think we need to. I think it's very valuable to do that. I'm agreeing with Mr. Schoonover. But their 154,000 cubic yard number is based off of an area, length by width, time depth. And their depth they're using is deeper than what he said. This project's only viable in the big scheme of what we're gonna spend and how much we spend annually anyways, if we can get more than 10 years out of it. If you do the math by a lesser depth, we go way below the 10 years of viable dirt. Now your cost to benefit is not there. The only way this works is if we get more than 11, I'll correct myself, it was 11, it was 11 and a half actually, more than 11 and a half years worth of material out of this. Craig has said a couple of times now that we've already used a year and a half's worth of material. So knowing that, we're using an extra half a year each year, we're cutting the life of that source. We're below 11 and a half years, it's not viable at the $600,000.
I am a little confused, because if we pull that much out in 11 years, we were now going to spend more per year. In that 10,000 acres up to 10. If it's 4,500, it's got to prove it. It's 3 acres, and it's there of material. It's 5 acres, 3 acres of material.
I accepted the 10, I agree. Now that I hear a plan for the money, I'm on board with the 10.
Okay.
Your 154,000 cubic yard number isn't a viable amount of material if you don't dig the length by width times the depth that you've come up with. If you lessen any one of those, you don't get 154,000 cubic yards. At 9,100 cubic yards a year, you divide that, you get your 16.8 years that you guys are saying you're going to get 17 years. Any less amount of 154,000 cubic, you're getting less years out of that.
No, I agree with you. Till we do the pore samples, whatever we do, something we find like the corner is really good, but when we go over the other side, it's no good. It's got to come back with a number of what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. Until we do the bore samples to see how much is actually there, I don't agree.
And I agree. And
okay.
I don't know if the Wyndham Sheriff's going to get me in trouble, but I walked down below that property the other day. There's a significant pile of spent farm material, manure, stuff on the back side of that property.
Yeah, they're gonna move it. They know it's there.
Is that in their measurement?
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's we were there and we walked it. Russ and I. And he put it there originally to cover the land when he's all done. So.
Further discussion on Article 20 down here.
Hi, my name's Ron Bosson. I live in Westminster. It seems to me that I get the objections, but it feels like we're going in circles. $10,000 feels like a small thing to spend, and we got people who they're giving it their best shot. I think even if we blow the $10,000, I'm right on the edge of calling the question. I want to give people a chance, though. But it seems to me that this is money that needs to be spent to find out.
One more.
I would like to call the question.
Is there a second? The motion to call the question is seconded, non-debatable, 2/3 majority. All those in favor of calling the question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The question is called. We are at the main article to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum not to exceed $10,000 to create a probability study for the possible purchase of a parcel of land with a house and commercial building for the purpose of sand and gravel processing, approximately 154,000 cubic yards available. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Article 20 is carried. Article 21, Mr. Beebe.
Oh, I'm sorry. I moved this article as well.
Article 21, to see if the voters of the town of Westminster will raise and appropriate the sum of $170,000 to fix approximately 600 feet of town road on Henwood Hill with payments equaling $37,500 or less per year for 5 years. Is there a second Article 21? Article 21 is moved and seconded. Discussion of Article 21, Mr. Beebe?
My first question is, how many people here know where Henwood Hill Road is? That's a good start. This request is to repair a section of Henwood Hill, covered Bridge Road, some of us will know it by that, that has had significant damage about a year and a half ago. About 100 feet of the road dropped, about 2 feet. And between Vermont Transportation and the town of Westminster, we have temporarily fixed it, made it narrower, and stabilized it. I'm not exactly going by the script here, but it is right on an S-turn on the Gageville or North Westminster end of Henwood Hill. It has become a safety issue. It should also be mentioned that in the year 2022, the bridge on Route 121 will be closed for 3 to 4 months, period. End of discussion. You're expected to detour around it. This is the quickest way to get from I-91 to North Westminster or Bellows Falls. If anybody's ever measured it, it's 5/8 of a mile closer to go over Henwood Hill to get to Bellows Falls than it is to go the other way. If you don't think it gets a lot of traffic now, it does. When this bridge is closed, my fear is that people are going to look at their GPS on their car and say, ooh, here's a quick way to get there. And we've got a one-way section of road, or we've got a one-lane section of road on a blind corridor for 100 feet there. So we'd like to repair it. The additional pressure on this road and its one lane, because it will be the quickest way to get to I-91 from North Westminster and Bellows Falls. This project has been estimated under $300,000 with available grants, present highway budget, and labor compensation from the town of Westminster. We're expecting the total amount needed would be no more than $170,000.
Further discussion of Article 21, yes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Boslin, and I live in a house with my husband on property directly adjacent to where this impacted portion of the road is. In the 10 years that we've lived in the property, at least 3 cars have gone over the side and into the ravine at that exact corner, and that was when it was 2 ways. Right now, there's only a room for a single lane of traffic to go around that corner. So for the last 2 years, living on that road, you can only go in one direction. And at night, you can kind of see when the headlights are coming, and you can slow down and see them and wait, and it's not dangerous. During the day, I cannot tell you how many almost head-on collisions have happened in that corner. It's a lot. It's really a safety issue, and I hope that the town will support this because it's really needed. There's a lot of traffic on that road. Sorry. Oh, and if it's needed that the town needs to go into our land in order to accommodate that extra space to make it safe, we're willing to give whatever part of that is needed without cost so that the project can be made safe.
You got 154 yards we can take over there?
You're welcome to
it. Further discussion of Article 21. Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 21, $170,000 for repairs to Henwood Hill, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? The ayes appear to have it. Article 21 is carried. Article 22, Ms. Young. Before we start the discussion of Article 22, I have to acknowledge that I am the author of Article 22. which sort of puts me in an odd position in moderating the discussion of it. I will attempt to be, I will be neutral, hopefully, on it, but if anyone objects to me moderating the discussion of this article, I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Beebe.
I move the article as warned.
Guess there's no objections. Article 22, as warned. To see if the voters of the town of Westminster will approve formation of a school advisory committee consisting of 5 members to be elected by town meeting, with 2 members to serve 3-year terms and 3 members to serve 2-year terms, to have responsibility and authority to review, develop, and recommend for approval the following items in regard to educational programs housed in publicly owned facilities and operated at public expense for the purpose of educating pre-kindergarten through grade 8 students who are children of Westminster residents. 1, amendments to the Articles of Agreement of the Wyndham Northeast Union Elementary School District. 2, governance structures for the operation of educational programs. 3, policy, budget, personnel, reconfiguration of grade levels, school closure, and capital decisions necessary for the operation of the schools. Is there a second? It's moved and seconded. Discussion of Article 22. Mr. Major.
Hi, David Major. I was, as you know, I was chair of the Westminster School Board until the state declared that the school board no longer exists, which happened July 1. However, the school board has continued the school board members have continued to meet with the new transitional board for the merged district of Westminster, the forced to merge district of Westminster, Athens, and Grafton. So at least several of us every meeting of that merged district have been attending to try to represent Westminster's interests in the new merged district. I think the simplest way to explain this article is that we would like to continue having a group of people who are ready and willing to represent Westminster's issues in the merged district, in the new merged district. Also, you should know that the lawsuit that 33 towns, 33 plus 1 towns really, 34 towns, have brought against forced merger is still in the process. It's still being deliberated by the Supreme Court. There were oral arguments on January 15 in Middlebury that several of us attended. And then on February 19, the town of Huntington had their oral arguments before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has yet to make up its mind how it might rule. It is possible the Supreme Court will rule to say that forced mergers were unconstitutional and that towns should go back to having running their own schools. It's also possible the Supreme Court may say the state was right in going ahead with the Board of Education rulings to force the mergers. It's also possible the Supreme Court may refer the situation back to lower courts or to the legislature to say there are problems with it and you need to fix it. So we really have no idea. Possible that a group of, if we approve this article and then vote to have some members put on this advisory board, that it might end up being the sort of the new Westminster School Board, if or at least the seats of that Westminster School Board, if the Supreme Court vote or rules that forced mergers were unconstitutional. But it's also possible that the advisory board will simply be a backup for the board of the merged district to help advise them on the needs of the Westminster School in that forced merger. I also want to just acknowledge Melissa Carlstrom and Cheryl Charles, who are our Westminster residents who volunteered to be, they were on the Westminster School Board, they volunteered to be on the transitional board for the forced to merge district of Westminster, Athens, and Grafton. Been putting in a huge amount of time, because if you think of it, what was work done by 5 people from Westminster, 5 people from Grafton, and 3 people from Athens is now being done by 2 people from Westminster, 2 people from Athens, and 2 people from Grafton. It's a lot of work. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you read this article, you read it with the numbers 1, 2, 3, and the way it's worn in the book is A, B, C. And since I want it to pass, I don't want that
Technicality, the possible technicality to affect its validity.
Point well taken. I think I took the article off my own computer. You're absolutely correct. I misread, so change 1, 2, and 3 to A, B, and C. That I don't think needs an amendment. It's simply a moderator error. So we'll correct that. Mr. Axtell.
Dan Axtell. I would like the Assembly to hear the legal opinion of Attorney Larry Slayson, in particular, whether a challenge to this motion would be subject to summary judgment.
I don't even know who can respond to that. We do have a visitor from out of town who is faintly raising his hand. Jack Breyer from Grafton. If there's no objection, he's been in the thick of this. We'll hear from him.
Hi, I'm Jack Breyer. I live in Grafton, although I think a number of people in Grafton thought I lived in Westminster all these years. I am the unfortunate chair of the Forced Merger Board, and yes, there was a discussion with Attorney Slayson, which I believe the members of the Select Board also heard, concerning whether or not, if there was a dispute, whether there would be adjudication that would go in favor of this or not. And his view was that there was indeed a question. My view is that we probably don't care, because we think that it's really important for each town to have a constituency who can advise and advocate for their communities, that can do some of the work that the combined board has been really unable to do, particularly around developing a permanent Articles of Agreement. In fact, we are permanently merged, and that can act as the rump of new boards should the Supreme Court rule in favor of the litigants, of which we are one, to restore traditional order, restore the traditional boards. The reality that we face is that many of our original town boards have had their terms expire or are about to expire. So there literally is no governance structure that we can put back in place absent having these backup boards being available. We will be bringing to all of you and all the other town members of Grafton, Athens, Westminster, April 9th, to talk about electing a more permanent, semi-permanent board. But that board has no means to revert to the old structures because, in fact, no one has ever even agreed to the Articles of Incorporation we already have, the Articles of Agreement that has been imposed on us. So I think this is a good idea. We're completely comfortable with it. We've given it a test drive for, David, how many months have we been having the individual boards come? What we call the town boards, it's been months, right?
Yeah, since the budget, so since the end of the law.
Right, so I'm comfortable that this is a good idea. If there's a challenge later, there'll be a challenge later, but I can't imagine it will happen anytime in the foreseeable future.
Further discussion of Article 22. Ms. Gifford.
My initial question is what on this extensive list in the amendment is not actually already the responsibility of our town representatives on the WUESD? I don't quite understand why we need this duplicative structure right now. Also, it has been my hope that any future merged board would have been designed better and would have had proportional representation and would have had enough members to do the work. We put ourselves in this position by refusing to have the original plan for a board by just dragging our feet on it, unfortunately. There has been a notice, there's been an observation that the town's attorney, at least as reported by Mr. Breyer, had said that this would not pass legal muster. And if you want to hear that from in slightly more blunt terms, you can listen to it on Fact TV because he summarized it very succinctly there. Again, my essential question is what on this list is legitimately given to an advisory committee when we have representatives, even though their terms expired already because, again, of our lack of action. I don't understand how this even can pass muster.
Further discussion of Article 22. Any response? Yes, Ms. Charles.
Thank you. Cheryl Charles. I was, as you all know, an elected member of the Westminster Town School Board and now do serve with Melissa Carlson on the forcibly merged Athens, Grafton, Westminster Board. To Ms. Gifford's question of a moment ago, it is correct that the list of topics that this advisory board is being asked to address are analogous to what the board members' responsibilities are. However, this is advice. And I can just tell you, David Major said for such a long time that if this forced merger occurred, all of a sudden we would have such a reduction in the number of volunteers who would be able to come to meetings and help advise us. That is so true. So we're looking for more public engagement, more involvement, more wisdom from town members to help inform the thinking of those of us who do serve officially as board members.
Thank you. Further discussion of Article 22. Yes, Mr. Gregg.
John Gregg, I guess I do sort of side with Dan. I think we do need to know exactly what the town law says. And I guess I wonder whether, even though it says advisory committee, if some of the wording, especially recommend for approval, are we not de facto setting up a town school department, just like we have a town highway department, and whether that, what they recommend would come before town voters. And so I do think we need more legal information about this.
Further discussion of Article 22. You ready for the question? Article 22, which, yes? Over here. There's space down here, you know.
I'd love us to just go on to the question, but I do have a question first, like what are they gonna do to us? I mean, so if we weren't supposed to do it, well, we'll quit doing it. I mean, how bad can it be, is I guess my question. So, I guess I'm willing to call the question.
Down here, did she call the question? I know, this is a tough one. I didn't pick the order correctly. The question is called, is there a second to the motion to call the question? I have a second. The question is called, the issue being voting on the main article of 22. All those in favor of voting the article, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Nay. I believe, well, it's a 2/3. I still think we got 2/3. I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We are on the article. Article 22. To see if the voters of the town of Westminster will approve formation of a school advisory committee consisting of 5 members to be elected by a town meeting, with 2 members to serve 3-year terms and 3 members to serve 2-year terms, to have responsibility and authority to review, develop, and recommend for approval the following items in regard to educational programs housed in publicly owned facilities and operated at public expense for the purpose of educating pre-kindergarten through grade 8 students who are children of Westminster residents. A, amendments to the Articles of Agreement of the Wyndham Northeast Union Elementary School District. B, governance structures for the operation of educational programs. C, policy, budget, personnel, reconfiguration of grade levels, school closure, and capital decisions necessary for the operation of the schools. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Nay. I'm going to call that for the ayes. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Article 22 is approved. Article 23 is to elect members for that advisory committee.
I move the article as warned.
The process, this is an election from the floor, which we in Westminster are not used to. We do the majority of, well, pretty much all our elections by Australian ballot. So the process I propose is that first we place names in nomination, including people can nominate themselves. If we get more than 5 nominations, we will have an election, which can either be by voice vote or, if chosen by the assembly, by paper ballot. But the first step is nominations for membership on this committee, and given the way the article is structured, you should say whether you're nominating someone for a 2 or a 3-year position. The floor is open for nominations, and self-nominations are accepted. I nominate.
Okay, I may need a little help with this, but I nominate Rick Gordon. I nominate Elise Manning. I nominate Vanessa Stern. I nominate, okay. Charlie Hutchinson.
Thank you.
Yes, and I don't know which years. I don't care in the slightest. I'll nominate, well, the only person who's, okay, never mind. Why don't I nominate, let's see, not Rick Gordon, Charlie Hutchinson for 3 years. David Major for 3 years. Elise Manning for 2 years. And let's see, who else? Rick Gordon for 2 years. Was that it? And Vanessa Stern for 2 years. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Well, you filled out the roster. Are there other nominations? If there are no other nominations, we don't actually have to have a vote. We can just cast one ballot for each of these candidates.
Move the nominations be closed and that the moderator cast one ballot on behalf of the town meeting for the slate of nominees.
Is there a second for Mr. Dean's motion? It's moved and seconded to close the nominations and cast one ballot for each of the nominees, which I hereby do. You have your slate. Article 24. To transact any other proper business to be brought before the town of Westminster meeting. Mr. Dean.
I will not be bringing forth a motion at this meeting.
I'm disappointed. Mr. Major.
I wanted to bring it to this select board's attention and ask for their action for next year to have childcare during the town meeting and to pay for childcare. My daughter Marion was at the meeting and did express that she felt she had to leave because she was told that her child was too loud. That is not the way. We don't want young parents to have to leave the meeting. So I think it is very important that we actually have childcare, and now that we have just a town meeting, the select board is going to have to make sure, I hope, that that can be done for next year's meeting. Thank you.
We did do that for years, and interest dropped off, but it may simply, I agree with you that young people, young parents should be allowed to participate in the meeting, and I actually was resisting making any comment about those children, in part because small children don't really annoy me, although if you can't hear what's going on, it's a problem. So I also would encourage the select board to consider finding a way to provide child care during the meeting. We've done it in the past. Thank you. Any other business? Yes, Russ, Mr. Hodgkins.
In the back, there is Wyndham Regional Broadband Project survey sheets. I'd like to have Bobby Kilburn come up and explain to you if she's still here.
She's gone.
She's gone. So in the back, there's a Wyndham Regional Broadband Project sheet. We have still residents that do not have appropriate internet connections. And as you fill out this survey, it's not for or against, it's to help get some of the other people the service. So please don't feel that, oh, I like my service, so I don't have to fill it out. Everyone should fill it out so that these folks that don't have service can get service. And that's what it's all about. It's going to be a Wyndham County feasibility study, not just Westminster, and whether it comes out to be feasible or not, the surveys are going to be very crucial in that activity. So please take one, return it, or fill it out today and put it in the box. Thank you.
Also, I would like to throw in one reminder. Mr. Breyer already mentioned this, but the merged school districts, such as it is, will meet in this room on April 9th at 6:30. And that will be so it'll be anyone from Athens, Grafton, or Westminster is eligible to participate. And I encourage you all to do that. Yes, Ms. Streeter.
Jim Streeter, is there any way that the town special meeting can be the same day that the unified one is, so that we don't have to make work in the meeting?
9th sounds tight.
I was asking if there was any way that the unified school board meeting could coincide on the same night with the town select board meeting.
I think it's going to be too tight, according to us, for timing.
Other business?
I have one quick thing.
Yes, Ms. Harlan.
I was going to report on those assisted living, senior housing committee that started, but I'll just say that there are surveys about your opinions on a possibility of senior housing in town. They're up back, there should be boxes, but you can also drop them at the town hall, the Butterfield Library. I was hoping to ask Lisa if the Westminster West Library, and at town meeting, Tuesday for elections, there will be surveys. So please take one and think about it, fill it out. Thank you.
Other business? Yes, Mr. Miller. Wait for the mic.
Okay.
You have to talk right into the mic. It's really necessary.
Fran Renault, Westminster. I have a statement and a couple of questions. I'll start with the statement. I would like to see the Community Improvement Committee advertising that there is money available for low-income loans for people in Westminster. And my first question is that I understand that Russ is the animal control officer. Is that correct or not?
He says by default. He's crackling with enthusiasm down here.
Okay, well, I would just like to know what salary gets paid to him for that.
Ooh. Pulling down the big bucks on that one, are you? He's indicating a goose egg.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, other business over here. Ira.
I'm hoping next time we come back here that we can get rid of the chitter chatter behind the wall. Maybe it's my ADD, but it's kind of hard when there's so many conversations. And I know we're probably really sick of being here, but there's an awesome boys varsity basketball game being played here at 6 o'clock tonight. The boys are in the finals, very exciting. Thank you.
Other business. The admonition about the people behind the knee wall is well taken. It's particularly difficult in the back of this hall, I think, to hear. So you have to remember it for next year, but please bear that in mind. Ms. Waldo.
Just had a quick, Sarah Waldo, Westminster West. I had a quick question about the child care issue. Was there child care provided last year?
No, it's been a few years since we had it. It was? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other business? Way over there in the corner, Sally wants to say a piece.
I think we owe Ira a big thank you for being such a great runner.
Other business? Yes.
I'll just shout it out. All right, take it easy. Just if you don't make the basketball game or after the basketball game, and come to school hour. We asked it tonight. It's a fundraiser for the juniors going to Mexico in about a month. Dinner, dancing, silent auction. But if your loyalty is with the basketball team, I understand. Thank you.
Thank
6
you.
o'clock at Compass.
Other business? Seeing none, I will declare the meeting recessed to voting on Tuesday. Please come to the Westminster Institute and vote. In a second.